Welcome, everybody. I'm Kim Relaford. I'm one of the four therapists here at Employee Mental Health as far for your health and well-beings and employee engagement and benefits package here at UK. I'm really glad to be with you all today. This is actually the third part of a series that I've been doing on supporting mental well-being in the workplace. And the first two parts were already recorded and are available to you on the Health and Wellbeing YouTube page, and this one will be as well. Once it's ready and has been loaded, I'll make sure to make to send you everybody who is here. Actually, everybody who registered for the program today will receive an email from me with a link to the video as well as a PDF of the slides so that you can refer back to them and have some of the resources that I have at the end available to you. We're talking about how to support employee mental health today. We're going to talk about practical tips for responding to an employee struggling with mental health issues that impact their work performance. And we're also going to talk about behaviors and having those tough conversations with compassion. Okay. So here is a bigger look at what we're going to be talking about today. I'm going to talk about three major things: reasons employees struggle at work, some foundations about having communication, about talking about difficult conversations, and also some communication tools that you might be able to use in your conversations with employees. Let's talk about some of the more common issues that we see. So, when we talk about the impact of work behavior, some of the things that we'll notice will kind of be issues that will impact that are lack of not job knowledge, maybe insufficient training, feeling overwhelmed, lack of tools to complete tasks, or feeling like they are doing too many projects and their priorities are split and making it difficult to manage their work and time. Communication is another big area, including how the information flows between, from cascading from top down across, and then also back up, how that communication flow occurs there. And how that communication and information is provided. Sometimes not having enough information to do and perform well, and then lack of recognition. Communication is part of that. It's like, this is the things we need to work on. Then these are challenges, but really let's focus on also what we are achieving and what's going well. Another common issue that we'll find is things like work-life balance, particularly if the schedule is inflexible, or maybe they just are not good at balancing work and life, lack of motivation, untreated or undertreated physical or mental health issues, and family crises can really undermine work behaviors. The last area is relationships. And this is an area where you are thinking about like lack of trust at work, staff conflicts, bullying, maybe limited clarity of roles, and inconsistent expectations. So let's start with some foundational things to think about when we're thinking about supporting mental health. These are universal practices that you can use in any relationship, but specifically, we're looking at them in mental health. We're going to talk about compassion, open communication. And we're going to talk about encouraging wellness, performance reviews, investing in yourself as a supervisor, and welcoming feedback. Let's dig into that. So, when we think about fostering compassion, this is setting an expectation that compassion is the approach to all aspects of your work for yourself, your coworkers, leaders, and employees. Foster a supportive environment invested in everyone's well-being. So, fostering compassion is not just speaking with compassion or showing compassion. It's also looking at the work as a whole and how we interact with each other from a compassionate standpoint as well. Some of the things that can involve are actively listening to the colleague without judgment. Active listening is a skill that everybody can learn and is not always, for everybody, it is not a natural skill. Sometimes it's a learned skill, but active listening is about actually listening to what the person is saying without trying to come up with your response or allowing yourself to maybe to feel defensive or feeling those emotions, but not reacting in them in order to really focus on what you're hearing, not initially your reaction to what's being heard. We also can notice when colleagues are having a hard time at work or personally and just check in with them. Accepting criticism and being careful when expressing our opinions, noticing and sympathizing with colleagues, experiencing when they're experiencing challenging situations. Um, Encouraging others, not only acknowledging when things are going hard, but also acknowledging when things are going well, whether it's at personal life or at work. But like just making sure that you acknowledge that things, you really things are going well. Things had a successful project. Offering to help someone with a task can also be with a compassionate way to address, work life and just our mental health in general, knowing that we're in this together and that we can pitch in when needed. Compassionate with the work helps promote healthy relationships, job satisfaction, and employee engagement. Right. So let's talk next about open communication in a safe environment. So, what's your open door policy? Do your employees know when you're available and how to request time to meet with you? Do you routinely meet with your employees for check-ins? Office hours and routine check-ins are an opportunity to ask if there's anything that is causing the employee stress or leading to feelings of burnout. Simple questions asked they often can help employees see their manager as someone who supports them. So, I realize that, a lot of times the actual check-ins, routine supervision, these things like that, it can be really difficult to do in an environment where we all have way too many things on our plate and we're all trying to just get through it. But actually having these check-ins and putting them in your calendar is actually a really more efficient way to manage communication because you know and the employee knows that that time's coming. I really appreciate that about my own supervisor. I know that every 2 weeks she has 30 minutes set aside for me and that I can make a list of things I want to talk to her about. She does the same. Of course, we communicate in between those 2 weeks as things come up, but I do know that that's a time when I'm going to be able to talk to her about things and what I'm and issues. So, but these are some questions you can routinely ask that can help with diminishing stress and burnout. How do you feel about your workload? Do you need help completing your tasks? Do you have any family obligations this week that we need to work around? And do you need anything from management to support you? That's a really powerful question to ask. Not always what they ask for are things that we can provide them, but sometimes they might be things that are such a simple thing that if they didn't ask, we wouldn't even know that was something that we could offer to them. Okay. The next one that we can work on is encouraging wellness when we're talking about supporting employee mental health. So one of those things that you have here at UK is all of the wellness options through health and well-being. Of course, our program, Mental Health, where we offer 5 free sessions a year to UK employees, their sponsored dependents, and retirees. Also, we have personal finance programming that can help people when they're struggling financially and thinking about how to manage their money. We have some ideas on nutrition and physical activity, and there are ways to request flexible work. We have working parents and elder care supports as well. These are these wraparound, big picture things that we can provide to our employees, and making sure that as the supervisors, we know what's available to them, and knowing resources helps us to manage and allow for them to provide that compassion by giving resources at the times when they're needed. Okay. So another thing to think about is, do you actually welcome feedback? When we routinely ask what our employees need and what's working and what's not, how do we do that? Is that just a check-in, or is it during their annual evaluation, or is it a standing meeting and team meetings? Like, do you have time to talk about kudos, compliments, and concerns about what's going on with the team, things that you can just check in on? Maybe just sending an email and just saying, just checking in with everybody, anything you all need, anything I should know about, just allowing them to know that you are here and being supportive of them. These are, and also it's again, it's about your own time and manage your own expectations of yourself. These are small things that you can do that make a big impact. But also, don't forget to close that loop. If you ask what they need and you don't act or you don't return and give them feedback on why or why not that can happen, that's just out there going, "Hey, I'd love to hear what's going on," and then no response to that ever again. Then they stop telling you what's going on. So take all the feedback into consideration and then be transparent. What's possible and what's not possible in those situations. Investing in yourself. And we talked about this in the last session where we talked about self-care for supervisors. But if we want our employees to think about their mental health and we want to be supportive of their mental health, we also need to support our own mental health. Things like modeling well-being, reaching out to other leaders, considering a mentor, or connecting with peers. There's also courses on professional development on demand through HR that are some really good trainings that I don't think that we're always even aware that are available to us. Some of them are asynchronous, so you can watch them or review the information at your leisure. Others are timed, and there's a calendar available for you to see what's available and what might be helpful for to you as we continue to grow in our professions. It also means growing in our leadership skills. Okay. Performance reviews. So, all of us are, all of you, all who are supervisors, I'd say all of us, because for a long time I was in that boat with you. But so it's easy to say us. But anyway, it's time for employee performance reviews, right? And so a lot of apprehension and sometimes apathy around this whole process can occur with employees. So because they're worried about what's going to come up. And so thinking about how you're going to talk about things in important performance reviews and making sure that, like, did you build in regular check-in points and have you already talked to them about some of your concerns? Don't forget to highlight what's going right, not just problems. It's not what you say, but how you say it. So these are some examples of that. Avoid the you. Anytime you start with the word you in a sentence, people are already, their ears are like perked up and their defenses start rising very slowly, like a force field, because you're late again. You missed that deadline. You need to stop talking to coworkers and answer the phone. And even if you don't say it in that tone, that word you, just drives us crazy. Instead, rephrase to help an employee grow. Example of this. I noticed you were running behind again this morning. Can we explore why that's happening and work on a plan for being here on time? If that's that we thing, we're in this together. Let me help you solve this. I noticed you missed the deadline for the report last week. Can you walk me through what's happening so we can work together to ensure we won't run into similar issues in the future? This is also a great place to document what you have done to support the employee, because when it comes down to it, performance reviews and supervision is about work behaviors and and ensuring that the work is done. At the end of the day, your job is to make sure that the work gets done. I know, so does you really enjoy talking to your coworkers and catching up in the morning. And that's important for teamwork and camaraderie. However, I've noticed it sometimes gets in the way of answering the phone. Can we identify ways to check in with your coworkers while answering the phone in a timely manner? I'll also say it's a lot easier to rephrase these when we're not frustrated. So if the first time we see somebody being late, or when we notice the pattern, when the pattern becomes like not one-offs, but like, oh, I'm noticing that this has happened more than once recently, that's the time to start talking about it and to addressing it. Because if you wait until you're frustrated and it's just becoming, I always talk about, I'd rather hear about a concern before it becomes a problem, because that's when, concerns are very solvable, and that usually have a way to work things out very quickly, or at least get on the right path. But with problems, now you're talking about, is this a performance evaluation issue? Is this a corrective action issue? So early and often, it's obviously, and also it helps with people just being able to hear you. Always document. Consider an email summary of what was discussed, action items, expectations, and a plan for following up. We talked about it. If I'm the employee, we talked about it. I got an email from you. I am very clear on what the expectation was and what we said we were going to work on. But then remember to close that loop and check back in on any plan that was made with them. Oops. So speaking about this high deal of like supporting employees, sometimes when you talk to them about issues or concerns, they're going to trigger the fact that this might be an FML or ADA qualifying event. So if you think about FML, it's Family Medical Leave, ADA, Americans with Disability Act. So when you're talking to somebody about their behavior and they talk about a health issue or an elder care issue or someone else in their home is having problems, these are the times when you need to make sure that you are providing them with the information they need, unless this might become a family medical leave qualifying event. So then it's your role to send that memo notification and obtain a signed copy of the memo. You can't make them turn the information into the FML office, but you can stress that that paperwork is to be submitted to the FML office. only. And that's really important because we as supervisors are not supposed to see medical records. Of course, some of our supervisees are more open about what's going on with them than others. And so we may know the details, but we don't need that in writing. That's for the FML office. But also inform employees of the process before sending the memo. So you don't want to have a conversation, you express compassion and concern, and then you go back to the office and you say, oh, by the way, this might be an FMLA issue, and here's the memo. I need you to sign this that I gave it to you. And I know that none of you all would do that, but it's really about how that perception is about this. Is this the support that you're offering, or is it a threat? And so you want to make sure that you're talking to them and explaining how FML works. I know the FMLA office often will come and do trainings for departments and supervisors to just give them an idea about how to handle these issues. And so talking through these and what you need to do, also just calling them up before you are, if you're concerned that it might be an FML event, and that how do you approach that? They are really great about being supportive around that. Same thing with an ADA. Anytime an employee requests a work accommodation, and I'm not talking about like coming, taking an hour and 15-minute lunch so they can run to the school for an event at the school and coming back. That is a reasonable, flexible request as long as it works within the work schedule and they make that 15 minutes up. I'm talking about like work accommodations, like allowing them to, come in, work from home in the morning on days that they are not feeling so well and then coming in later in the day. That's a work accommodation. Or, before you purchase them something important like a printer or something because feel like they can't concentrate unless they have the information right there at their fingertips, so they want a printer on their desk. These are work accommodations, and they have to be approved by the ADA coordinator, and they do that by completing the request for reasonable accommodations. This is something that you just say, you know what, this might be an accommodation. I'm not sure. That's a decision for the ADA coordinator. So I'm going to send you a link to a request for reasonable accommodation. You fill that information out. As a supervisor, it's your role to provide the link to the form and document the request, and that link to the form was provided. And inform employees of the process before sending that link. This is the way for us to address those higher level concerns using what's available to us through HR and the FML office, ADA office, and making sure that, again, with compassion, but also staying in our role as supervisor and ensuring that, we're doing our job to manage the work. Okay. I want to spend the rest of our time talking about some communication tools that are very helpful on having difficult conversations. Anytime they're uncomfortable, there's a lot that goes into them. We have to, as supervisors, manage our own emotions and expectations in that situation, and also use some of these really good skills that we're going to talk about to help you really think about how you're going to approach that conversation. First, I want to talk about ask culture and guess culture, because a lot of us fall in one or the other. And so the way we perceive communication can be very different. So in ask culture, you're someone that's going to encourage it encourages individuals to openly request what they desire, regardless of how extravagantly or unreasonable it seems. You know, people are going to people are going to ask you things, and all the time they're going to be like, well, what about this? Can I do this? I'm thinking about this. What do you have? Well, I really think this would be helpful. And sometimes they might be, a little extravagant or unreasonable. And so but it's just their way of actually communicating what they're thinking and needing. And they might become across as rude or bossy or aggressive, or sometimes downright insulting, but it puts people on the spot. And as supervisors, when we were trying to manage all that information, that kind of coming at us can sometimes really feel uncomfortable, because because what happens is they're exchanging their discomfort of not knowing for certainty. I tend to be an ask culture person, and I know this because when I was a little kid, my mother would say maybe. And I could not stand that word. I'm still not really big fan of it, but I think I've grown up a little bit since then. But she would say, maybe. And I'd say, yes or no, not maybe. I want to know, right? I can deal with a no, but I need to know if it's a no. I can't deal with the maybe possibility, wishy-washy part of that. Sure. The guest culture is more from an observant, intuitive, higher sensitivity. They tend to be less assertive, almost downright passive aggressive sometimes. Like they'll say something offhand, or they won't actually ask for what they need. They avoid discomfort at the cost of clarity, and they also just avoid discomfort at any cost. And they resent having to say no. So not only do they not want to rock the boat from their own side, but when an employee comes in, if you're a guest culture supervisor, when somebody comes and asks you something, you really are uncomfortable having to say no to them. But yes and no are part of the supervision process. And so if you have an ask person who's coming to you to a guest supervisor, and they're like, I really think we need to start doing it this way. And you're like, oh, here we go again. And you may resent having to say, we've covered this before. I understand that that's something that's important to you, but as a whole, that is not something that we are going to be able to do right now. We start to get the almost discomfort, uncomfortable, and dread when somebody comes at us like that if we're guest culture. So, thinking about ask and guest culture, how do you think this, shapes your communication style? When you're holding a conversation with an employee, are they ask or guest? And this helps you to think about your own approach. So, thinking about the people you supervise now, you could probably identify who's an ask culture person and who's a guest culture person, and then think about how you need to approach or manage your own culture when you're dealing with them. So, all right. I I love Viktor Frankl, but I also really love this idea. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. Ideal here is that when something happens, an action, we get to choose our reaction, but sometimes it almost feels like it happens simultaneously. Maybe we lash out or maybe we shut down. But actually, between that stimulus, whatever that is, it doesn't even matter what it is, and how we decide we're going to react to it, we actually have a little bit of time in there. And if we take that pause and actually power through that space and think about what we want to do before we respond, it actually helps us to feel better about our response, and it makes us feel free because we actually feel like we feel good about how we're responding to things. So the bigger piece of this that I wanted to talk about is this idea of practicing the pause. And some of you all have been in mine and Rhonda Henry's relationship trainings. We talk a lot about this because it's such a powerful thing if you can if you start actually, managing it and using it and building it as a skill. So Mark Twain said that the right word may be effective, but no word was ever as effective as the rightly timed pause. So thinking about that, the right word might be effective, but the pause might actually be the most important thing and be more effective than what you say after it. So practicing the pause. Pause before you speak. Breathe deep, observe your feelings and reactions, and then respond using positive response, meaningful response, and reasonable response. So, what are you actually doing here? You're doing emotional regulation. Pausing rather than reacting allows us to take that step back, calm ourselves, and think more objectively about the situation. This can prevent the sort of impulsive or emotionally driven responses that we often later regret. I know that when my mouth gets ahead of my pause, that's when I am not my best version of myself. So, one of the things that I've learned to do, and my friend Ann across the hall actually does as well, is, like when something happens, maybe I get an email and it's just like, it just hits wrong. And so before I go and type out a really fast response, I go to myself, power pause, and I make myself step back from that email and really think about how I want to respond to that. Maybe go get a drink of water, maybe walk around for a second, go to the bathroom, take a deep breath, and then think about, okay, why is this frustrating? Is it what's being asked? Is it the way it's being asked? What am I reacting to here? And then, getting in touch and observing my feelings, and then asking myself, how do I want to respond to this that is not out of reactiveness, but is assertive and proactive? How do I want to respond positively and with meaning? Um, And then when you're talking about an employee who may be struggling and that they're talking about what they're experiencing or they're feeling defensive, it's really easy for their energy to invite us to also meet that energy of defensiveness. So when you are experiencing and listening to somebody, you really want to be listening and thinking about what they're saying before reacting. Oh, that comes to active and reflective listening. There are so many Google activities that you can just go in there and Google, and I'm sure even AI would give you examples of how to do this. But it's a really easy idea. It's not always the easiest skill to implement. It takes practice and intentionality to actually use these. And I'm not going to tell you it's easy even for me, and I get paid to actively and reflectively listen. Sometimes it's really hard to put those tools on using them, but it's important. And it's because it helps us understand the other person's point of view. It helps calm emotional distress. It helps develop positive relationships and allows us to focus on emotional support instead of offering opinions and solutions. So, active listening includes things like um, asking open-ended questions instead of asking a question of like, are you going to be late tomorrow? Yes or no? Or instead saying, how are you going to avoid being late tomorrow? Tell me some things I can help you about. Let's problem solve about that. What are some things you can put in place to help you be on time? Request clarification. Let me stop you there. Can you tell me a little bit more about what that meant? It sounds like you're really angry about that. Tell me a little bit more about why you're feeling so frustrated and angry. Ask more, request clarification, get deeper, be attentive, put that phone down, listen without interrupting, seek that understanding before being understood by asking those open-ended questions, listen for those nonverbal cues. People's body language will often tell you more than what they're saying. Especially I'm a hand person, so I have to like in this presentation, I probably sat on my hand twice as many times as I've spoken at this point. But when my hands are going, I'm animated. I am worked up about something, or it's really important to me. And so what is my hands telling you? Is this important to me or am I frustrated? So look for what my body is telling you as much as what my words are saying. Withhold that judgment until you the end and advice and just listen and be patient. Some other those are summarizing. So, what I heard you say was that you're really concerned about this new process that's being put into place. Can you tell me more about your concerns or reflect feelings? It looks like you're really feeling angry about this or frustrated. Or what I heard you say was that you're feeling sad about this situation or afraid about what might happen with your job. Reflect those feelings back and be attuned to those feelings. Ask probing questions. Don't just ask the surface questions. Go a little bit deeper because oftentimes somebody brings to us as the concern is just the tip of the iceberg, right? We only see when with an iceberg, you only see the very tip. Usually there's a lot more going on underneath the surface. And so making sure you ask those probing questions to really try to get out what the concerns are. Okay, let's talk about facilitating those tough conversations. We've all had to have them. And I've already mentioned this first one, but don't procrastinate. Don't put it off. It's not going to get any easier. And then it's probably going to happen two or three more times. And then you're going to be forced to act. So, again, that idea of like, was this something that was a concern back here and now is a major problem? So, when we avoid that conversation, it leads to concerns becoming problems and feelings to fester. You will be more frustrated because you're like, oh, here we go again. Why can't they get that right? And so our feelings are also something we're managing when we don't procrastinate. We're doing it, pulling off the band-aid, we're dealing with the issue. Plan your talking points. That's part of that thing about like you not using you, but really thinking about how you want to approach how you're going to say something. Write down some notes, refer back to them during the conversation because emotions sometimes get high. And when we feel those emotions, sometimes we get off track. And so those talking points that you have will allow you to go back and say, okay, I'm hearing what you're saying, but let's go back to this point and then we'll come back to your point. Keeping that conversation, thinking of it as a facilitation of a conversation as well as a conversation. So you're the one that's like running the agenda for the conversation. Consider how the other people may respond, but don't script it. Because honestly, I will tell you, folks with anxiety disorders do this all the time. They script their conversations and they think about when I see that person, I'm going to say this and this and this, and this is how I'm going to respond. And then they start the conversation and they will tell you almost immediately that that is not how the conversation goes. So they've worked themselves up and they have this whole idea on what they're going to say, but because they already assumed what was going to happen by considering how the other person may have responded, but more assuming how they responded, then when that actually happens and that's not how they respond, then we don't have anything left in the tank because we were all worked up for that other thing. So you want to kind of have some suggestions in your mind about how you might approach different ways they might respond. But trust your gut, trust your experience, trust that you are a kind of person that will be able to handle the conversation, even if it means stopping the conversation and coming back. It's more about just being prepared. Talk with the other person. Ask for a good time and place to talk where you won't be interrupted. So don't, just run over and pull them out and have a hard conversation. Be more thoughtful and mindful about that. This is the first place we can show compassion. They're busy, they're worried about what might be said. Let's not do this here in the middle of the hallway. When's a good time? I really want to talk to you about something. Choose a comfortable environment and also consider if anybody else should be involved in the conversation. Depending on the issue, sometimes we need one up with us, or we might need a peer with us. If it's an employee that you're concerned about because of their previous reactions, you might just want somebody there to be a witness to what both of you all say. And to give you feedback afterwards about how you handled things. This is a really good place to have a safe person available to like really listen and just be an observer role and give you feedback about how the conversation went. Focus on behaviors, not personalities. This is when this happened, not when you happened, right? When you're back to those ideas of like, I noticed you've been late this morning. Is there something going on I need to know about? How can we avoid this in the future? We're talking about the lateness. We're not talking about them being lazy or unable to get up or how terrible they are. We're focusing on that behavior. It's really important. Give a specific instance, no always or never. Always and never fighting words. You always are late. You never get here on time. People, again, there are some words in our English language that are fighting words, and always and never can tend to be those. Also, we do that to ourselves in our heads. We go, here we go again. You always do this. You're never going to get this right. And so we put ourselves on the defensive and work on and can't even manage our own stress when we use those words like always or never. Those are called cognitive distortions because honestly, there are very few things in this life that are always one way or never another. And so really focusing on what's happening and giving specific instances helps us to avoid that. Be confident but empathetic. You want to use your good supervisor voice. You want to be clear about your expectations, but you also want to show empathy and concern for what's going on. To active and reflective listening. When we're really listening to what they say, we will respond to the emotions and the situation, and we will do that with compassion. Listen carefully, and we talked about this already, but pay attention to what they're saying, not what you're going to say in response. This is a hard one because when we're having hard conversations, all we're trying to do is figure out what we're supposed to say next because we're uncomfortable. And so, we're trying to do solving when we're still in problem mode. Like first we need to identify what the problem is and really define it, and then we can work on solutions. So when we're not paying attention to what somebody's saying, we're missing all of the aspects of it because we're so worried about how we're going to respond. Avoid interrupting. Really think about letting them talk. Sometimes they will talk themselves into their own solution if you just give them the opportunity and avoid that interrupting. Summarize and paraphrase, use those good body cue skills, leaning into them, making eye contact but not staring them down, making sure that you're giving them your full attention so that they understand that they're being heard and allowing them to kind of process through that before you out for your own thoughts and feelings. Then ask questions to clarify your understanding until you both agree that you understand what the issue is. And then also remember, sometimes it's okay to take a break. That was a lot that we talked about. It feels like it probably felt very uncomfortable. It did to me. This is a tough conversation to have. I think maybe let's take a break. I'm gonna get something to drink. Maybe we'll just resume this afternoon and let us kind of let what we've talked about percolate, and then we're gonna come back and talk about it more and see what we can do about making a plan to address the concern. Now we're developing a plan. SMART goals. A lot of people have heard of those. As a therapist, we believe that's the only way to make goals. That the SMART goal means it's specific, it's measurable. So this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to know if it's working. We know that it's achievable and realistic, and and it's time bound. So even if it's a work behavior like being late, let's check back in a month and see if this plan is working, and literally kind of like pay attention, both of us, to when you're late, and then check in about that. But in a month, we're going to come back and we're going to look at our plan and see if it's holding up or if we need to change it. Include when you will check in on progress, like I just said, and when you will meet again. That's that closing the loop piece of communicating and conflict management. Then following through, stick to that plan, including sending a summary and a follow-up resources discussed. Stay solution focused and give it time to work. This is a great time to write that email, particularly within, probably within that same day, if not within 24 hours, sitting down and summarizing. And it doesn't have to be in and summarizing the whole conversation. Just, we've met. Here are the highlights of what we discussed. Here's the plan that we have in place, and we're going to meet again on such and such date. Please check in with me throughout this time period if I can support you in any way, or if you already know we need to modify the plan, and let's talk about it. Reflect on what experience. So this is where you can use other supervisors or peers and talk about what went well and what could I improve next time. You can also reflect on the experience at the end with the employee. So what did you feel good about with this conversation? What went well? Where could we have done a little bit better? What could we improve next time as well? It also helps you to kind of really help them think about reflecting on this experience when you're talking about those tough conversations. And I just see that it says facilitating touch conversations at the top. We're not talking about touch. We need to keep our hands to ourselves unless invited. Sorry, just a little joke. All right. So we have just a few minutes. I want to show this video, and I'm hoping that this will work. But this is a TED Talk about 10 ways to have a better conversation. I kind of want to wrap up with that, and then we'll talk about some resources. This is Celeste Healy. She's a really good storyteller.
We just had to follow the advice of Henry Higgins in My Fair Lady, stick to the weather and your health. But these days, with climate change and anti-vaxxing, those subjects are not safe either. So this world that we live in, this world in which every conversation has the potential to devolve into an argument, where our politicians can't speak to one another, and where even the most trivial of issues have someone fighting both passionately for it and against it, it's not normal. Pew Research did a study of 10,000 American adults, and they found that at this moment, we are more polarized, we are more divided than we ever have been in history. We're less likely to compromise, which means we're not listening to each other, and we make decisions about where to live, who to marry, and even who our friends are going to be based on what we already believe. Again, that means we're not listening to each other. A conversation requires a balance between talking and listening, and somewhere along the way we lost that balance. Now, part of that is due to technology, the smartphones that you all either have in your hands or close enough that you could grab them really quickly. According to Pew Research, about a third of American teenagers send more than 100 texts a day. And many of them, almost most of them, are more likely to text their friends than they are to talk to them face to face. There's this great piece in The Atlantic. It was written by a high school teacher named Paul Barnwell. And he gave his kids a communication project. He wanted to teach them how to speak on a specific subject without using notes. And he said this: I came to realize that conversational competence might be the single most overlooked skill we fail to teach. Kids spend hours each day engaging with ideas and each other through screens, but rarely do they have an opportunity to hone their interpersonal communication skills. It might sound like a funny question, but we have to ask ourselves, is there any 21st century skill more important than being able to sustain coherent, confident conversation? Now, I make my living talking to people. Nobel Prize winners, truck drivers, billionaires, kindergarten teachers, heads of state, plumbers. I talk to people that I like. I talk to people that I don't like. I talk to some people that I disagree with deeply on a personal level, but I still have a great conversation with them. So I'd like to spend the next 10 minutes or so teaching you how to talk and how to listen. Many of you have already heard a lot of advice on this. Things like look the person in the eye, think of interesting topics to discuss in advance, nod and smile to show that you're paying attention. Repeat back what you just heard or summarize it. So I want you to forget all of that. It is crap. There is no reason to learn how to show you're paying attention if you are, in fact, paying attention. Now, I actually use the exact same skills as a professional interviewer that I do in regular life. So I'm going to teach you how to interview people, and that's actually going to help you learn how to be better conversationalists. Learn to have a conversation without wasting your time, without getting bored, and please God, without offending anybody. We've all had really great conversations. We've had them before. We know what it's like. The kind of conversation where you walk away feeling engaged and inspired, or where you feel like you've made a real connection or you've been perfectly understood. There is no reason why most of your interactions can't be like that. So I have 10 basic rules. I'm going to walk you through all of them, but honestly, if you just choose one of them and master it, you're already going to enjoy better conversations. Number 1, don't multitask. And I don't mean just set down your cell phone or your tablet or your car keys or whatever's in your hand. I mean, be present. Be in that moment. Don't be thinking about your argument you have with your boss. Don't be thinking about what you're going to have for dinner. If you want to get out of the conversation, get out of the conversation. But don't be half in it and half out of it. Number 2, don't pontificate. If you want to just state your opinion without any opportunity for response or argument or pushback or growth, write a blog. Now, there's a really good reason why I don't allow pundits on my show, because they're really boring. If they're a conservative, they're going to hate Obama and food stamps and abortion. If they're a liberal, they're going to hate big banks and oil corporations and Dick Cheney. Totally predictable. And you don't want to be like that. You need to enter every conversation assuming that you have something to learn. The famed therapist Eb Scott Peck said that true listening requires a setting aside of oneself. And sometimes that means setting aside your personal opinion. He said that sensing this acceptance, the speaker will become less and less vulnerable and more likely to open up the inner recesses of his or her mind to the listener. Again, assume that you have something to learn. Bill Nye, everyone you will ever meet knows something that you don't. I put it this way: everybody is an expert in something. Number 3, use open-ended questions. In this case, take a cue from journalists. Start your questions with who, what, where, when, why, or how. If you put in a complicated question, you're going to get a simple answer out. If I ask you, were you terrified? You're going to respond to the most powerful word in that sentence, which is terrified, and the answer is, yes, I was, or no, I wasn't. Were you angry? Yes, I was very angry. Let them describe it. They're the ones that know. Try asking them things like, what was that like? How did that feel? Because then they might have to stop for a moment and think about it, and you're going to get a much more interesting response. Number 4, go with the flow. That means thoughts will come into your mind, and you need to let them go out of your mind. We've heard interviews often in which a guest is talking for several minutes, and then the host comes back in and asks a question which seems like it comes out of nowhere, or it's already been answered. That means the host probably stopped listening 2 minutes ago because he thought of this really clever question, and he was just bound and determined to say that. And we do the exact same thing. We're sitting there having a conversation with someone, and then we remember that time that we met Hugh Jackman in a coffee shop. And we stop listening. Stories and ideas are going to come to you. You need to let them come and let them go. Number 5, if you don't know, say that you don't know. Now, people on the radio, especially on NPR, are much more aware that they're going on the record. And so they're more careful about what they claim to be an expert in and what they claim to know for sure. do that. Err on the side of caution. Talk should not be cheap. Number 6, don't equate your experience with theirs. If they're talking about having lost a family member, don't start talking about the time that you lost a family member. If they're talking about the trouble that they're having at work, don't tell them about how much you hate your job. It's not the same. It is never the same. All experiences are individual. And more importantly, it is not about you. You don't need to take that moment to prove how amazing you are or how much you've suffered. Somebody asked Stephen Hawking once what his IQ was, and he says, I have no idea. People who brag about their IQs are losers. Conversations are not a promotional opportunity. Number 7, try not to repeat yourself. It's condescending and it's really boring. And we tend to do it a lot, especially in work conversations or in conversations with our kids. We have a point to make, so we just keep rephrasing it over and over. Don't do that. Number 8, stay out of the weeds. Frankly, people don't care about the years, the names, the dates, all those details that you're struggling to come up with in your mind. They don't care. What they care about is you. They care about what you're like, what you have in common. So forget the details. Leave them out. Number 9, this is not the last one, but it is the most important one. Listen. I cannot tell you how many really important people have said that listening is perhaps the number one most important skill that you could develop. Buddha said, and I'm paraphrasing, if your mouth is open, you're not learning. And Calvin Coolidge said, no man ever listened his way out of a job. Why do we not listen to each other? Number 1, we'd rather talk. When I'm talking, I'm in control. I don't have to hear anything I'm not interested in. I'm the center of attention. I can bolster my own identity. But there's another reason. We get distracted. The average person talks at about 225 words per minute, but we can listen at up to 500 words per minute. So our minds are filling in those other 275 words. And look, I know it takes effort and energy to actually pay attention to someone. But if you can't do that, you're not in a conversation. You're just two people shouting out barely related sentences in the same place. You have to listen to one another. Stephen Covey said it very beautifully. He said, most of us don't listen with the intent to understand. We listen with the intent to reply. One more rule, and number 10, and it's this one: be brief. Be interested in other people. You know, I grew up with a very famous grandfather, and there was kind of a ritual in my home. People would come over to talk to my grandparents, and after they would leave, my mother would come over to us and she'd say, do you know who that was? She was the runner-up to Miss America. He was the mayor of Sacramento. She won a Pulitzer Prize. He's a Russian ballet dancer. And I kind of grew up assuming everyone has some hidden amazing thing about them. And honestly, I think it's what makes me a better host. I keep my mouth shut as often as I possibly can. I keep my mind open, and I'm always prepared to be amazed, and I'm never disappointed. You do the same thing. Go out, talk to people, listen to people, and most importantly, be prepared to be amazed. Thanks.
I really like that. I think she pulls a lot of that idea of like what it really means to listen together. So I hope you all appreciated that video. I'm just going to wrap us up here. Someone in the chat asked about sharing the video link. And so I want you to know that it is here, and you will receive a copy again of these slides. And that way you'll be able to watch that or share it with other people if you so like. So when we're talking about employee behaviors and concerns, we think about when do we need to refer for assistance. And here are some reasons to look to refer for assistance or to seek consultation. When you see any change in normal behaviors that continue over time. Is there increased absences, tardiness, or too much time at work? When you see there's a decline in job performance, significantly doesn't have to be, huge, but significant decline. And when an employee asks for help. So as a supervisor, being aware of all the resources, when an employee does ask for help, being able to provide that is one of the best things you can do for them. Here are some of the things that are available here at UK. We already talked about the 5 free sessions that are provided through Health and Wellness. That I also mark these with orange dots if they were in more emergent or easily, emergency or crisis oriented, because I wanted you to know, like, when you have an acute crisis, where you might start. With mental health and wellness and our 5 free sessions, there tends to be a 2 to 6 week wait, depending on the therapist and what the time of year it is and all sorts of things. It is a limited number of sessions. However, we can do a lot in those sessions or else refer them on to ongoing therapy if needed. We could definitely screen and assess and make sure that they are headed in the right direction. If you feel like you have an employee who needs to be seen through a different more quickly than they can access an appointment through our scheduling system, just call this number that's there and speak to our wonderful Julie, and she will connect with us and see where we might be able to offer a more emergent appointment date and time. So that is an option for you all. UK psychiatry obviously is one of the options here at UK. There does tend to be a longer wait, and they take our insurance and copay. The IRAFT, or individual, family, and couples therapy, can they remember individual, relational, something family. Anyway, it's all about that. So they provide family and couples therapy. They have a sliding fee scale. UK employees can see a therapist there for $25 a session, which is actually less than most of our co-pays. There is a wide variance in wait times, and they are provided by therapy interns, but they're well supervised interns who are really practicing their skills. So in my mind, that's probably a win. If you are part of Team Blue or you go to Family and Community Medicine, there are also mental health services available through both of those clinics. And so that's an option as well. Private therapy, particularly with PPO insurance, but there is an out-of-pay copay. They might be seen a little bit more quickly, but honestly, there is a lack of enough mental health therapy to go around right now. So you're probably going to have to wait most places. Not maybe 2 to 6 weeks, but probably a couple of weeks to up to a month. Sometimes longer, depending on the therapist and what you're going for. Live Health Online is another option through our Anthem insurance. It is a zero copay for online appointments and therapy. They provide both psychiatric medication management as well as behavioral and talk therapy. They do have wide variance and wait times depending on the therapist that you choose, but you can find that by Googling UK and Live Health for details. But that's one of the more quicker routes to seeing a therapist. And finally, our crisis supports. There is a 24/7 mental health hotline. It's called 988. It is free, confidential, and there's live support available 24/7. And then here at UK, we also have a recent wonderful service, which is the UK Empath Clinic, which is emergency psychiatric treatment. So kind of helps people not to have to go through the emergency room when they're having a mental health crisis. And that is actually a live link that you can click on when you receive the file, the slides, but you really should look into them. They're a really good resource, and they're going to get lots of good wraparound and a quick 24-hour turnaround and come out with appointments for follow-up. And it's just a really nice option that I really am grateful what we have here at UK. Here's some other benefits that you can receive through personal for health and wellness. I'm not going to go over all of these, but there's so many things available. And so sometimes just calling and asking what's available or talking to one of us, we can point you in the right direction. So probably there's something here at UK that can be of assistance, or we as mental health therapists often have a really large toolbox that we can maybe provide some resources for if we don't have it here at UK. Here's some additional resources specifically to you for supervisors. We provide consultation for supervisors. This is a voluntary referral. You can sign up at this link. We could talk about like a specific employee, what's going on, what your concerns are, how you want to approach it, how you're managing your own emotions and feelings, some follow up. It's just like it's a good opportunity for supervisors to have somebody to talk about, particularly with around mental health and substance abuse concerns in the workplace. And sometimes we suspect something's going on because of the behaviors, but we don't know that it's mental health or substance abuse. So you can always come and talk to us about any kind of like stressors that you're seeing in employees and how to maybe approach conversations around that. At the hospital, they have Stress First Aid, which is a department-based program that allows you to learn about peer supports around our mental health and managing that on our teams. Ann and I provide QPR, which is question, persuade, and referred, which is suicide prevention training. It's a very simple steps. Learning how to question about the suicidal thoughts and feelings, persuade how to get help and where to refer them to. We offer that in person and virtually. Offer that campus-wide several times a year, mostly in May, which is Mental Health Month, and in September, which is Suicide Prevention Month. But you can actually request that more often if you like for your specific department. And also provide you with the links for family medical leave, employee relations, and ADA compliance. Here's our faces in case you want to know who you're signing up to see, one of our four main therapists. And that's all I have for you all. Thank you all so much for coming and joining me today. I know you could do lots of things over your lunch hour, but you chose to be here. And so for that, I greatly appreciate it. You all have a wonderful afternoon, and I will get these slides out and the recording as soon as I can. You all have a great day. Thanks.